Hey, this is Scott over at phasingplayer.com, and today I'm bringing you the first in what is going to hopefully be many vlogs. I want to start putting out weekly vlogs for the channel, where I can talk a bit about games that I'm playing and stuff that I'm doing, what you can expect from the channel in the near future, and a place to put things that are on my mind that maybe I don't have the impetus to make a full video for. So, as an example, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about board game editions. That's editions with an E, not with an A. Things that designers might return to, titles designers might return to, in order to revise things or touch things up or change stuff around, like first editions, second editions, etc. And I've been thinking about those a lot lately, and I want a chance to talk about them a little bit. And in general, I want to be able to put out regular weekly content for this channel. And I think these vlogs are hopefully going to be something that I'll have the time to do, and they'll ideally be interesting for the people watching. So this is going to be structured in 3 parts. Like I said, it's going to be stuff I've been up to, then stuff you can expect from the channel, and finally, something a little more planned out. So what have I been up to lately? Well, I have been playing a lot of Doom from 93 or 94. I always forget if it's 1993 or 1994. But the id Software first-person shooter, Doom. I do play video games. I enjoy video games. I play a lot of PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and I play other things too. I enjoy retro games. I used to collect retro video games. I had like 30 some odd consoles and 10 to like 100 games for each one. And eventually I realized that what I enjoyed about collecting was the hunt, right? Like finding stuff more than actually having it. And so I had all this stuff. I moved at one point and I had to transport this whole collection with me. I got all these for a pretty good deal over many years, and I could sell them for a tidy profit. I do play them. I like playing the actual physical consoles, but emulation has been pretty good. Emulation's good enough in many cases and is a lot more convenient. So I decided to sell all my games, sell all my consoles. I kept a couple. There's a Vectrex in the background there. You can see the side of it. I kept that. I think the Vectrex is a cool thing, and it doesn't emulate well because it uses graphics. It uses vector graphics. Not to get too into it, but it uses vector graphics instead of raster graphics, and emulating it is almost like you have to recreate it, and you don't get the same visual effect as you do from the actual console. So I kept that. I kept a couple things. I have an Atari 5200 still, and a Sega Tower of Power, a Genesis CD and 32X. And that's mostly it as far as retro stuff goes. I like to play emulated things, and so I like to return to those old games. Sort of a roundabout way of me saying I've been playing Doom lately. I picked up the Doom 3 BFG edition not that long ago, largely because it came with Doom 1 and Doom 2. And so I've been playing through Doom 1. I'm on the last episode now, and then I'm going to jump to Doom 2 and play through Doom 3 as well, in sort of in anticipation for Doom Eternal coming out soon. I loved the 2016 Doom reboot. I thought it was amazing and one of my favorite modern games, I would say. Actually, I would say it's one of my favorite games, period. I loved that game. And I'm very much looking forward to Doom Eternal. So as far as what I've been up to lately, I've been playing video games. I've been playing board games as well. Been enjoying the new Food Chain Magnate expansion. I've been enjoying PAX Transhumanity. Both of those things I have done streams on, so feel free to check them out on the channel if you've not yet. We have streams up for Food Chain with the coffee module and new milestones. And then PAX Transhumanity, where Matt Eklund joined us in the chat and had some insight about the game. So check those out if you haven't already. I also picked up some titles recently. I picked up a couple of GMT games. I picked up Navajo Wars. This came in the mail today. I have not yet played it, but I'm very much looking forward to. Solitaire gaming is something I enjoy, and I've heard very good things about both of Joel Toppin's games, Navajo Wars and Comancheria. Comancheria, I also actually picked up a used copy of that recently as well. And then the other GMT title I picked up is Mark Herman's masterpiece, Empire of the Sun. And I like CDGs, card-driven war games. I like hex and counter war games. And Empire of the Sun is sort of like almost like a meeting of those two things in a lot of ways. It's a two-player World War II game set in the Pacific Theater. One player plays the United States, and the other one plays Japan. There's also an elaborate bot in all the editions, but it's been enhanced in this one. And so, yeah, I've not yet played it. I haven't cracked into it. I've heard it is very complex and hard to get into. But those are two games I picked up. They arrived in the mail just a couple hours ago. And I'm going to probably, after shooting this, maybe bust into Navajo Wars a little bit and see how that goes. So as far as what the channel is going to be bringing, well, I have a bunch of ideas in mind right now and a bunch of stuff I'm working on. I'm not going to talk about all of it right now, but one thing that people have asked me on a few occasions is if I'm going to do more print and play videos like I did with Dune. And I know people enjoyed that Dune video. I got a bunch of comments on it. I've gotten some emails about it. Very happy that people have enjoyed the video because I really liked putting that together. I like putting together print and plays in general. And so am I going to do more videos that are kind of a tutorial demonstration of putting together a print and play? And yeah, absolutely I am. And the one I am working on next that I think I'm going to be shooting next week is I've already started putting together prototypes of the pieces. Now, if you recognize this, you'll know what game I'm going to be doing. If you don't, this is a hex from Magic Realm, which is a game from the 1970s, put out by Avalon Hill. And it is sort of a precursor to Mage Knight in a lot of ways. It's like a fantasy adventure role-playing game, sort of, that you make a map out of these hexes. They're double-sided, and you go on quests, and you fight monsters, and deal with NPCs, and all kinds of stuff. There are a bunch of different classes in it, and it has maintained quite a lot of popularity over the years, over the last like 30-ish years that it's been around. Used copies of the game go for $100 or more, and it's a little tricky to find sometimes too. So there's a really nice looking print and play on Board Game Geek that I have grabbed all the files for. I've been printing out some stuff as tests for sizing and kind of figuring out the materials I want to use. It has these big hexes that I want to be kind of thick. I want to be, not just flimsy paper. I don't want to just print them on a sheet of paper and laminate them and that's it. I want them to be a bit nicer, so I've settled on something here. I've tried a few things, and I've settled on a sort of procedure for making these that I think I'm pretty happy with. I want them to be a matte finish, so I don't want to put gloss laminate on them and have them be super reflective. But there are a lot of components in this game, and matte laminate pouches are not cheap. They're like 3 times the price of gloss laminate pouches. So I've come up with something to laminate them with gloss pouches, so it's a little cheaper, but to put a matte finish on. I've tried a couple different varnishes, and I think I found something I'm happy with. So I'm excited to put that together, not only so I can play it, but so I can make a video and hopefully encourage other people to put these games together. Print and plays can be intimidating at first, but honestly, with like an inkjet printer and a rotary cutter and a couple of extra tools, you can make these beautiful print and plays that people have been so kind to dedicate time to assembling for you. And Dune, Ilya's Dune that I put together in a previous video last year, that's now like the official Dune art, which is cool, that Gale Force 9 put out. They use that same art. And yeah, this Magic Realm is also a very attractive design. And so look for that. Probably, if I'm going to be shooting it next week, then I have to edit it. Probably, I would say like March, maybe, would be like early March, about a month from now. I would expect that. I'm not committing to that 100%, but yeah, keep an eye out. That's probably the next big thing the channel will be putting out. All right, and last on this vlog, I want to talk a bit about board game editions. Now, there are some companies that love editions, and there are some companies and designers that sort of finish a game and that's it. Tom Russell of Hollandspiel, who was on our Westphalia stream, the Westphalia game that he designed, he was kind enough to come down to Chicago, sit in and play his new game with us. And it was a lot of fun. It was great having Tom here. And he's someone who doesn't tend to return to his games. He makes them, puts them out. is engaging with the community. He doesn't give it the cold shoulder, but he tends to learn from his games and apply it to future games instead of trying to revise his previous designs. There are exceptions. He did make some rule changes for Westphalia. He's doing a Table Battles 2nd edition, though that looks largely like it's sort of quality of life improvements rather than major game changes. But for the most part, for the games he's put out, he has not really returned to them. And I think that's great. I'm a fan of that, I will say. But there are some companies and some designers who like to return to their stuff. Recently, Cole Worley has been returning to some of his old designs. He went from Pax Pamir 1st edition to the much more robust and high quality production of 2nd edition. And he is now returning to John Company. In the later part of this year, there will be a 2nd edition of John Company coming to Kickstarter, and it sounds like it's going to be a pretty big production as well. Even if that wasn't the original intention, it sounds like it's turning into a whole thing. Hopefully, I'll be bringing you guys some John Company coverage this year, as well as 2nd edition coverage later on in the year. So keep an eye out for that. But the main company I want to talk about right now is Sierra Madre Games, and specifically the kind of owner, founder, and primary designer for Sierra Madre, Philip Eklund. He has, I think maybe, I'd have to really think about it here, I think he has done a 2nd edition and beyond for nearly all of his games, maybe all of his games. There's an Insecta 1st edition, which was the first game published under the Sierra Madre imprint. And he came out with an Insecta 2nd edition from Fat Messiah Games just a few years after. High Frontier has had a bunch of editions. There's a 2nd edition of Paxson Renaissance coming out this year in 2020. And he tends to return to his stuff. Even the Pax series in general are sort of 2nd editions of his Lords games. Pax Porfiriana is sort of a rethinking of Lords of the Sierra Madre. Pax Renaissance is a rethinking of Lords of the Renaissance, and a lot of his stuff is he sort of has a few broad game ideas, and he kind of keeps returning to those. And it is interesting. It's interesting to see where he feels like he can improve on an idea, but leaving some of those old designs in the dust is disappointing because old designs are not inherently bad, and 2nd editions and 3rd editions are not inherently improved. A series of his specifically I'm going to talk about is the Megafauna series. It started out with American Megafauna that I have here, and this incidentally is the American Megafauna 2nd edition. There is an edition before this. It is very similar. This is not that different. It has nicer components. It's got a color map. The original was sort of packed in a baggie and had all black and white photocopied components. Which maybe is somewhat maybe not. This is not strictly an improvement. This box is bad. I don't like to call stuff flat out bad often, but this box is terrible. It's if you guys played PC games in the early 90s or before even, when they came in the big boxes, that is essentially what this is. And the bottom of this box has to be taped shut, otherwise all the components just drop out the bottom. It's a rough box. But anyway, so American Megafauna was a very early game from Phil. It came out, I think, in 97. And it is a cool idea. It is about kind of life in North America, animal life, and how it evolved and how it changed and how there was competition between different species and how the environment shaped a lot of what survived and what died off. And it's a neat game. It's a very cool game, as the back says. It's got prehistory, ecology, catastrophes, and chimeras. It's a cool game. And like I said, this was the 2nd edition of the game. This is from 2001. So there's from 97 to 2001. There was a gap, and he came out with the 2nd edition, which is largely the same as the 1st edition. And then a little while later, he was working on an American Megafauna 3rd edition. Now, this never came out. It only existed as a rule book and maybe some printable components on the American Megafauna Yahoo group there are files for it, or there were. There's a whole thing going with Yahoo files, Yahoo Groups files. They might not be around anymore. I downloaded them, so I do have the PDF for American Megafauna 3rd edition. I have not broken into it yet, but it does exist. However, it never came out because Phil decided instead to revise the series a little further and turn it into BIOS Megafauna. So American Megafauna 1st edition turned into American Megafauna 2nd edition, and American Megafauna 3rd edition turned into BIOS Megafauna. And BIOS Megafauna is a lot like American Megafauna. The actual games are not that wildly different. You have this map of North America, and you have little species squares that you put out on the board, and they migrate around, and the temperature and the climate change, which affects species. You have a variety of species that grow and get mutations. It's not that dissimilar, and BIOS Megafauna is a pretty logical evolution of American Megafauna. And I think that BIOS Megafauna's 1st edition is a very good game. I like this game a lot, and expect to see it on the channel at some point. And of course, being effectively the 3rd edition of a game, you would expect it to sort of end there. 3rd editions are the game should be pretty well evolved at that point and pretty well put together. But Phil wanted to expand it further, and so in, I think it was 2012. What does this box say? I don't see exactly where, but at some point, around a decade later, Phil came out with BIOS Megafauna 2nd edition. And it is actually, I think this is a bad release. And I don't mean it in the sense that it is a bad game. It's not a bad game. But he felt the need to change the title from American Megafauna to BIOS Megafauna to sort of represent a shift, right? The shift from American Megafauna to BIOS Megafauna, BIOS has a much nicer production. It's a way nicer component quality. It's a much nicer rule book. It is just generally a nicer version of American Megafauna. BIOS Megafauna 2nd edition, however, is a wildly different game. It is almost unrecognizable compared to the 1st edition of BIOS Megafauna. It uses a much different map. It uses different types of cards. It has a much more robust climate system. It is a much different game. You're not just BIOS Megafauna was strictly dinosaurs and mammals. BIOS Megafauna 2nd edition introduces plants and invertebrates and all kinds of stuff. It's the theme is not even really the same. It is a much different game. But because it is called BIOS Megafauna 2nd edition, it officially replaces the 1st edition. And this is sort of my thesis for this little essay. I think that 2nd editions sharing the name of the originals and replacing the originals in a publisher's catalog kind of sucks. Because when the games change dramatically between 1st editions and 2nd editions, you are losing access to that 1st edition. And I do think the original BIOS Megafauna, for my tastes, and I'm sure for other people's tastes, is a more fun game than the 2nd edition. I prefer the 1st edition, and I know that this is not the only title where people have that opinion. I haven't played it, but A Study in Emerald, I think, has the 1st edition is generally more revered than the 2nd edition. And it's a bummer that you can't easily get those older editions. So I guess what's the alternative? Like, I guess in my head, it would be nice if this were just a different game. If BIOS Megafauna 1st edition continued to be in print, or at least every now and again came back into print. Doesn't have to be in print all the time. It's not really reasonable for a small publisher. But this is, I think, such a radically different game that it could take a different title and exist alongside BIOS Megafauna instead of replacing it. So in this day, in 2020, print and plays are popular. Print and plays that you can buy are popular. War Game Vault sells games for a bunch of people. I've bought some stuff of Nate Hayden's on there, who I've done his game World War III and a game he worked on with others, Sea Evil, on this channel before. And he has some of his games, a couple of his older titles, on War Game Vault for purchase. San Quentin Kings and After Pablo, both of which you can expect to see here at some point. And I mentioned Tom Russell from Hollandspiel earlier. He sells just about all of Hollandspiel's games as print and plays if you want to go that route. It's I think, from my perspective, for someone that has access to materials and has the craftiness and know-how of putting these things together, a great way to get access to some games that are maybe not popular enough to do print runs of. You can't really take on the financial responsibility to do big print runs of some of these things, but has fans that would want access to it. And giving them print and play abilities is, I think, a great middle ground. Now, I understand some of these old titles, like American Megafauna from 97 or Insecta from like 1992, even earlier. They're from a young designer, a young publisher who might not have access to those files anymore. As much as I would love to buy a copy of Rocket Flight and do a print and play of it, Phil Eklund might not have access to those files anymore, and he'd have to get a copy and scan it and clean it up and format it well for printing. I understand that there's work that goes into it. It's not just click a button and you're done. But I feel like there's an audience. I feel like there's people there that would like that sort of thing. And when you come out with new games, with new editions, you sort of muddy the waters a little bit. You are maybe trying to sell things to people that makes them feel like they need to revise their edition. So I mentioned earlier, there's a John Company second edition coming out. And I've seen a bunch of people say like, oh, I just bought the first edition. I just picked up a used copy of the first edition, and now the second edition's coming. My copy is going to be useless now. And like, that's totally not the case. Old editions are not automatically invalidated by new editions. They are maybe for the publisher's catalog, but they're not for people playing those games. I think hanging on to old editions is valuable because sometimes those old editions are going to be what you prefer over a cleaned up one. They might take out your favorite mechanic or your favorite system, or they might tweak it in a way that doesn't really appeal to your game group. It's impossible to tell without trying them both. And I think over time, you end up losing easy access to some of those older editions. Furthermore, editions and printings, whatever you want to call them, can sort of make things confusing, make buying a game confusing. Take, for instance, the Empire of the Sun that I just bought. This is the 2018 edition of it. And it is officially the second edition and second printing. The second edition and second printing comes with it's a 3-inch box, it's a deeper box than a smaller 2-inch box. And it has the sort of expansion from the C3I magazine. It's sort of like a bonus scenario, comes with its own map. And it's got a new bot, a new solitaire bot in here, a redesigned one. And so it's kind of strange that it's called the second edition and second printing versus the previous one, which was just the second edition. Because this isn't just the second printing of the second edition. It is effectively a third edition because it has rule changes. It has component changes. And I think it's confusing when you name stuff like second edition and second printing, because what does a printing mean then? Is it like, I wouldn't expect something that is just a new printing of a game to be different, but I would expect an edition to be different. That is not the case with Empire of the Sun. Second edition versus second edition and second printing. It's a mouthful. They're different things. Or you have stuff too. Sometimes you get stealth changes. I have these games that I just bought next to me, so I'm thinking about them. Navajo Wars. The Navajo Wars has some map changes and some errata changes in here, which is fine. That's great. But other than it saying it's from 2019, doesn't suggest that there are any changes to this version because it's not called the second edition. There's no, other than the copyright date, there's no notation down here like there is with Empire of the Sun or Bios Megafauna. That there are differences in the box. So there's not a lot of consistency with how even one company names its releases. And some companies like Sierra Madre Games puts out wide sweeping changes for new editions that I feel like should just be different games. But anyway, I feel like I've rambled on long enough. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be putting out weekly vlogs. Expect them to go up roughly Wednesday. I would say between Tuesday and Thursday, somewhere in that range. I'll nail down an exact date at some point. But expect those on a weekly basis. Roughly the same format each time. Tell me what you guys think of it. If you think this is lame and I shouldn't even bother with these, let me know. Leave a comment in the video. Send me an email, scott@phasingplayer.com. You can also just go to phasingplayer.com and there's a contact button that'll let you fill out a little box and that gets sent over to me too. I'd be happy to talk with anyone about anything they want. Thank you for those that have emailed and have left comments. I always love reading them and I try to respond to all of them. And I enjoy engaging with people that are watching my videos. If you like them or if you don't like them, I'd love to hear from you. And if you like the channel, go check out our other videos. Consider subscribing and consider supporting the channel at phasingplayer.com/donate. I've got options for Patreon, PayPal, some other stuff. If you want to do one-time donations, monthly donations, it's certainly not a mandatory thing, but it helps the channel grow and it helps us put out new types of content and more regular content. So to everyone that has donated, thank you so much. That is so kind of you. And every time I take a look at the page and I see people have sent some money over, it makes my heart grow 10 times its size. In the metaphorical way, not the literal way. I'm not dying in that capacity. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your evening or day whenever you're watching this. And I'm gonna go make some dinner and crack into Navajo Wars. So take care.